My name is Eva W. Huffman. I am 33 years old and I work in commercial real estate analysis. I live in a large West Coast city and my life runs on calendars, spreadsheets, and routine. Long workdays, early workouts, quiet nights. I don't improvise big decisions, I plan them. My boyfriend was Ethan. He was 30. We had been together for just over 3 years and living together for the last 14 months in a rented apartment near downtown. From the outside, we looked settled. We split the lease. We shared a savings account. We had a ring picked out, bought but not yet announced, sitting quietly in a drawer like a promise, waiting for the right moment. Ethan liked to describe himself as spontaneous. In reality, he liked leverage. He pushed boundaries, watched reactions, then reframed resistance as insecurity. His default tone was light, joking, but edged with entitlement when he expected agreement. I ignored that longer than I should have. The boys' trip had been talked about for weeks. A beach destination, a rented house, a group chat that never stopped buzzing. I didn't object. I never do. I trust behavior, not promises. The shift happened while he was packing. I was at the kitchen table reviewing numbers when he walked out of the bedroom holding swim trunks, laughing into his phone. He tossed a pile onto the counter and said he'd been thinking. That tone always meant he had already decided something. He said he didn't want to feel restricted anymore, that travel changed people, that he wanted freedom without consequences. Then he said it plainly. Either we open the relationship while he's gone, or we're done. He said it casually, like he was asking what we should order for dinner. I didn't argue. I didn't ask follow-up questions. I didn't ask who. I just looked at him and said, no problem. He smiled like he thought he'd won. What he didn't realize was that I wasn't agreeing to his terms. I was agreeing with the ending. He kept packing like nothing had happened, humming, tossing clothes into the suitcase, talking about flight times and how they might extend the trip if they were having fun. Every few minutes he glanced at me, waiting for something. A question, a reaction, jealousy. I gave him none of it. When he finally noticed the silence wasn't temporary, he asked if I was really okay with it. I said yes, absolutely. That confused him more than anger would have. He asked if I wanted to set rules, boundaries, communication, expectations. I told him there was no need. That was when the edge crept in. He smirked and said, "See, this is why I love you. You're not controlling like other women." He said most women would freak out, that I was mature enough to handle reality, that this would make us stronger. I nodded and went back to my laptop. What he didn't know was that I had already shifted into logistics mode. When someone gives you an ultimatum that disrespects the foundation of your relationship, the emotional part is already over. All that's left is execution. The next morning, while Ethan was out getting a haircut for the trip, I called the leasing office and asked about early termination clauses, fees, notice periods. I pulled up our joint savings account and checked the balance. I reviewed the ring return policy. All boring, unromantic steps that suddenly mattered a lot. When he came back, he was glowing. Fresh cut, new energy. He told me one of his friends might bring a woman back to the house and joked that he hoped I wouldn't be jealous if he did too. He said it like a test. I told him to have fun and asked what time his flight was again. That night, he packed the last of his things for the trip. I packed something too, not a suitcase. Documents, passwords, a checklist. He fell asleep smiling, convinced he had just expanded his options without losing his security. I lay awake next to him, already living in a different version of my life. He thought the open relationship started when he got on the plane. It actually started the moment he gave me the ultimatum. The morning of his flight, I woke up before he did. Not out of nerves, out of habit. I made coffee, sat at the table, and started moving money. Our joint savings account had been pitched as a symbol of trust. In reality, I had contributed about 80% of it. I transferred my share into a new account under my name only. Clean, legal, no drama. I left his portion untouched. Next was the ring. We had bought it together. Technically, he said we picked it out together. In reality, he liked deciding things and calling it compromise. It was sitting in the back of my dresser in its box, waiting for some perfect future moment that suddenly no longer existed. I put it back in the original bag with the receipt. When Ethan woke up, he was buzzing with excitement, moving through the apartment half-dressed, checking chargers, passport, cologne, headphones. He kissed me on the cheek and said, "Don't wait up." Then he laughed and added, "Unless you're out too." I smiled and told him to have a great trip. He left an hour later, suitcase rolling behind him, completely unaware that the version of me he expected to come back to no longer existed. The second the door closed, I got to work. I sent written notice to the leasing office. I paid the early termination fee. Expensive, yes, but cheaper than staying tied to someone who treated commitment like an inconvenience. I scheduled movers for the following week. I forwarded my mail. I changed passwords on everything that mattered. That afternoon, I returned the ring. The clerk asked if everything was okay. I said yes and meant it. By the time his plane took off, our relationship was already functionally over. He just hadn't received the notification yet. That evening, he texted me from the airport and said he missed me already. He sent a selfie with his friends and told me this was going to be good for us. I replied with a heart emoji, not because I was playing games, because there was no point explaining something he would only understand once it was done. He thought the open relationship meant freedom. What it really meant was that I was finally free too. The first crack in his confidence showed up 2 days into the trip. He texted me late at night saying the place was amazing, but something felt off. He asked what I was up to. I told him I was busy with work and settling some things. That was true, just not in the way he imagined. The next morning, he asked why our joint savings app showed a lower balance. His message was framed as casual curiosity, but I could see the tension underneath it. I replied that I moved my portion into my own account. I said it plainly, like it was a routine adjustment. I did not wait for the response. I blocked his number, then messaging apps, then social media. Everywhere he could reach me directly, I closed the door. Not out of anger, out of clarity. That conversation was not going to improve with more words. The silence after that was immediate and noticeable. No buzzing phone, no rapid-fire messages, just quiet. I went back to what I was doing. That afternoon, the leasing office confirmed the termination date. One more box checked. I forwarded the confirmation to my personal email and archived the rest. Later that night, I checked my email and saw multiple missed call notifications from unknown numbers. I did not answer. I deleted them. If Ethan had something urgent to say, he could say it later, through lawyers if needed. He thought the open relationship meant flexibility. What it actually meant was that he no longer had access. And from that moment on, everything started unraveling for him without me saying another word. Blocking him flipped the dynamic instantly. Within an hour, my email started filling up. Long messages, short ones. Subject lines like "please answer" and "what is happening." I didn't read them closely. I skimmed just enough to confirm the pattern. Confusion first, then accusation, then panic. He tried reaching me through his friends next. One of them messaged me on LinkedIn of all places, saying Ethan was worried and didn't understand why I had disappeared. I ignored it. Another friend emailed asking if I was okay because Ethan was telling people I was spiraling. That one I archived without responding. What he couldn't understand was that this wasn't emotional. It was procedural. I spent that afternoon finalizing the move. Movers confirmed. New apartment approved. Deposit paid from my account only. I redirected my direct deposit. I separated subscriptions. Every shared thread got cut cleanly. That night, I received a notification from the jewelry store. Refund processed. The money hit my account the next morning. Seeing that balance felt oddly grounding, like closing a loop I had left open too long. Meanwhile, Ethan was still on the trip. Apparently, the boys' trip vibe shifted fast. According to someone who reached out later, he spent most of the third day glued to his phone, snapping at his friends, drinking too much, complaining that I was ruining everything by being dramatic and unresponsive. He told them I was being passive-aggressive, that I agreed to the open relationship and then punished him for it, that I was trying to scare him into compliance. What he didn't say was that he never once asked how I felt. He only noticed a problem when the safety net disappeared. 2 days later, he tried again through my work email. This time, the message was calmer, measured. He said we should pause everything until he got back and talk face-to-face, that we were making irreversible decisions too fast. That was the point. I didn't reply. I was already living in the version of my life where his ultimatum had been taken seriously, and he was still treating it like a negotiation. By the time his plane was scheduled to land, there was nothing left for him to come back to. I know this because the leasing office emailed me confirming the unit walkthrough time I had scheduled for the same afternoon. I planned it intentionally. I didn't want overlap. I didn't want a reunion scene. I wanted separation to stay clean. He found out the hard way. According to the building manager, Ethan showed up at the apartment dragging his suitcase, exhausted and already irritated, only to be told the lease had been terminated and movers had cleared most of the unit. His name was still technically on the lease, but the process was already irreversible. That was when the panic apparently became real. He tried calling from the lobby phone. Blocked. He emailed again, longer this time, less attitude. He said he didn't realize I would actually do something this extreme. He said an open relationship didn't mean an open exit. He said we needed to talk before things went too far. Things were already past that point. I moved into my new place that evening. Smaller, quieter, mine. No shared closets. No joint drawers. No passive-aggressive comments about decor. I slept on a mattress on the floor and felt lighter than I had in months. The next day, he escalated. He showed up at my office. Security called me instead of letting him through. They said there was a man downstairs claiming it was an emergency. When I came down, he was crying. He said I had cut him off without explanation. That was when I realized he truly believed my silence was temporary. I told security I didn't know him and asked them to handle it. Apparently, that hurt more than anything else. That night, he sent one final email. No blame, no insults, just desperation. He said he never meant to lose me, that the ultimatum was supposed to start a conversation, that he thought I would fight for us. I read that one carefully, then I archived it. When someone says change the rules or we are done, and you respond by taking them at their word, there is nothing left to discuss. He thought he was opening the relationship. What he actually opened was the door for me to leave. And I walked through it without looking back. After he showed up at my office, the emails didn't stop. I know that not because I read them, but because I set a filter. Anything from Ethan's address went straight into a folder I never opened. No previews, no notifications, no subject lines popping up on my screen. I wasn't playing hard to get. I was done receiving input. That distinction mattered more than anything he wrote. From what I heard later, the tone of the emails shifted daily. First came anger, accusations that I blindsided him, that I weaponized silence, that I was cruel for doing all of this while he was gone. Then came rationalizations. He said he never wanted a real open relationship, that it was about feeling desired, that I should have known him better than to take it literally. After that came bargaining. He offered compromises he had mocked months earlier, counseling, boundaries, closing the relationship again. He even suggested we reset and pretend the trip never happened. The audacity of that almost impressed me. I still didn't read a single word. What I did notice was how quiet my life became when his voice disappeared from it. No tension in my shoulders when my phone buzzed. No rehearsing arguments in my head before walking through the door. At work, my focus sharpened. I took on a new project without hesitation. I started sleeping through the night again. I cooked meals without commentary about calories, effort, or how some other man would do it differently. Mutual friends stopped reaching out once it became clear I wasn't engaging. Drama only survives when there's an audience. Apparently that frustrated him the most. He wanted a reaction, any reaction. Anger, hurt, nostalgia, even hatred would have been something he could push against. Silence gave him nothing. The irony was that he accused me of avoiding accountability while refusing to take any himself. The ultimatum was his choice. The consequences were mine. I didn't ghost him. I exited. And by refusing to read his emails, I made sure the past stayed exactly where it belonged. By the second week, the situation stopped being loud and started being messy. Silence has a way of amplifying other people's behavior. Without me responding, Ethan started filling the void with explanations directed at anyone who would listen. Friends, co-workers, family members who barely knew me. Everyone got a slightly different version. In one version, I panicked. In another, I was manipulative. In another, I was emotionally unavailable and pushed him into asking for an open relationship. The common thread was that nothing was ever his fault. Context was optional. Accountability was absent. The filtered email folder kept growing. 10, 15, 20. I never clicked. I never skimmed. I never let curiosity win. I already knew the pattern well enough to predict the contents. What I did read were the legal confirmations. Lease termination finalized. Deposit disposition clarified. Utilities closed. Everything neat and boring and irreversible. I moved the last of my things into storage and donated what I didn't want to carry forward. Each small task made the separation feel more real and more permanent. One evening, a mutual friend called and asked if I had read Ethan's latest email. I said no and meant it. He hesitated and said Ethan was saying he poured his heart out and that my silence was cruel. I told him something I hadn't said out loud yet. I said if someone gives you an ultimatum that dismantles the relationship, they forfeit the right to a reaction when you accept it. He didn't argue. Apparently, Ethan couldn't stand that I never acknowledged his explanations. In his mind, silence meant I didn't understand. What he never considered was that understanding doesn't equal agreement. I didn't need closure emails. I already had closure the moment he tried to renegotiate monogamy like a packing list item. He wanted emotional processing. I chose finality. And as the noise around him grew more frantic, my life grew quieter in a way that felt intentional. That contrast was the confirmation I had done the right thing. The first time I truly felt the fallout wasn't through Ethan. It was through other people adjusting their behavior around me. Friends who had stayed neutral stopped asking if I would ever talk to him again. Coworkers who knew the situation stopped making jokes about relationship drama. Even my parents, who had liked him quietly, stopped bringing him up. The absence settled into permanence without a conversation. Ethan, on the other hand, didn't adjust as quickly. I know this because the filtered email folder kept growing. 30, 40, more. I never opened a single one. I didn't mark them as read. I didn't forward them. They existed in a digital limbo that mirrored his place in my life. At some point, he switched tactics again. Instead of pleading, he started framing himself as the one who escaped. He told people he asked for an open relationship because he felt trapped, that my reaction proved he was right to question our future, that my silence showed emotional immaturity. The story almost worked. Almost. The problem with rewriting history is that timing still exists. He asked for freedom while packing for a vacation. I responded by removing myself entirely. People can debate tone and intention all they want, but cause and effect is difficult to argue with. One mutual friend eventually told me Ethan was furious that I never fought for him, that he expected resistance, passion, something to prove he mattered enough to provoke a response. That expectation said more than any email ever could. He didn't want resolution. He wanted confirmation that he was irreplaceable, that he could push the limits of commitment without consequences. Instead, he got proof that ultimatums work both ways. By then, I had fully settled into my new place. New routines, new accounts, no shared anything. I started dating again slowly, carefully, with a filter I hadn't had before. Anyone who used leverage as a communication tool was immediately disqualified. The irony was that the open relationship he wanted so badly never actually happened. He lost the relationship before he ever opened it, and he never got an explanation. That silence was the answer. The last update I ever got about Ethan came months later, and it wasn't from him. It came sideways, through a mutual friend who mentioned it casually, like weather. New place, new roommates, new story. Apparently, he was telling people the breakup forced him to grow up, that losing me taught him independence, that he finally understood consequences. I hope that part was true for his sake, not mine. By then, the filtered email folder had stopped growing. I noticed one afternoon that weeks had passed without a new message appearing. Not because I had been counting, but because the number hadn't changed. That was how it ended. Not with closure, not with a final speech, just with the absence of new noise. I never read a single email. People sometimes ask if I regret not explaining myself, if I think silence was too harsh, if I should have given him clarity. My answer is always the same. Explanations are for misunderstandings. This wasn't a misunderstanding, it was a values check. He wanted the freedom of being single without the cost of being single. He wanted commitment as a safety net. He wanted to renegotiate loyalty like it was a subscription he could pause. When he said open relationship or we are done, I took him seriously. I didn't argue. I didn't bargain. I didn't try to be the understanding woman who swallows discomfort to keep the peace. I accepted the terms and chose the option that preserved my self-respect. Breaking the lease cost money. Returning the ring cost nothing compared to keeping it. Moving my savings into my own account wasn't revenge. It was alignment. The quiet life I live now isn't accidental. It's built on one decision, made cleanly and followed through without hesitation. If there's any advice buried in this story, it's simple. Ultimatums aren't invitations to negotiate. They're declarations. And when someone declares they're willing to risk losing you to get what they want, believe them the first time. That was the end of us, and the beginning of a life that no longer required permission.